Charting Toward Intimacy covers mature topics. Listener discretion is advised.
What is the marital debt? Is there an obligation for married couples to have sex? Welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, the sex and intimacy podcast for Catholic women. My name is Ellen Holloway, and I'm a Catholic speaker and coach who specializes in sex and marital intimacy, and I am on a mission to help you actually enjoy and desire good, holy sex with your husband. So today, I want to talk to you guys about obligation and like obligatory sex versus like this marital debt that we hear about. And I want to talk to you guys about it in the context of our obligation to attend Sunday Mass and holy days of obligation. So why do we have an obligation to attend Sunday Mass? Like, what popped into your head? Because I think sometimes we think that we have this obligation to attend Sunday Mass and holy days of obligation so that we learn obedience to God. But I want to challenge that is not at all why we have obligations to attend Mass. Learning obedience is a pretty primary skill. That's something that, I'm teaching my 5-year-old about obedience. As adults, God and Mother Church are not trying to teach us obedience anymore. They're like, you know how to obey. You're an adult. This obligation to attend Sunday Mass is basically just like you're obliged to do it because you very obviously should yearn to do it regardless of any obligation. Attending Sunday Mass is that which gives us life. Receiving the Eucharist is that which gives us life. We should want to attend Mass as often as possible. Our souls yearn for it. And that obligation is present, I think, in some ways to help us remember the importance and help us remember that deep, ultimate, like soul level yearning that we should have. So now let's talk about sex. Then what would be the problem then if we started touting like, well, married couples are obliged to have sex? Well, then we get into the same problem that many Catholics today have with the obligation to attend Sunday Mass and holy days of obligation of like, oh, well, I'm only doing this because of obedience. I'm only doing this because I have to. I'm only doing this because it's something that I have to give my husband. I have to do it because of XYZ, right? That's not why we should be having sex. We should be having sex because we desire to have sex, because sex is really good, because sex gives our marriage life and it has the ability to co-create literal life. Sex is the matter of the sacrament of marriage. Sex is the way that God can reach his hand into our marriage and give us grace most efficaciously. So an obligation for sex makes not a ton of sense because it makes not a ton of sense if we're thinking about it as this obligation, right? The obligation to attend Mass on a holy day of obligation doesn't really make sense if we're only thinking about it as I have to just do this to appease the Lord because somehow the Lord needs me to go to Mass. The Lord doesn't need anything. He's God. You need to go to Mass for you. But ultimately, you should be desiring Mass on this deep, deep, intimate level because it gives us life. We'll be back with the episode in just a minute.
Have you ever had the experience of learning something or hearing something really interesting or awesome on this podcast and then trying to go explain it to your husband but it just does not come across correctly, or somehow the conversation just turns into an argument when all you wanted to do was share something that you learned. Look, talking about sex is really hard. I struggled with it for so much of my marriage before I started learning the tools and the specific types of conversations that my husband and I needed to have in order to make our sex life incredible. And so I put all of these tools and these frameworks for conversations into one super easy to digest course called Let's Talk About It. I want you to have these tools. I want you to have an amazing sex life, and having conversations about sex and actually talking about these things is what is going to get you there. Check out the link in the show notes for Let's Talk About It, or go to vinesinfullbloom.com/let's talk. And that is like, and on this podcast, we talk a lot about the similarities of like sex and prayer and sex and the liturgy. Every single sacrament has a marital aspect to it. So there's all these connections here. And we can allow other aspects of our faith to help inform us in our marriage. And so, the answer to this marital debt thing that people are always like, oh, you just must be reading St. Paul wrong. I don't think that's necessarily correct, because we do have an obligation to attend Sunday Mass. If you live in the United States, the USCCB has told us, your bishop, your local ordinariate, has made it clear to you that you are obliged to attend Sunday Mass. Because it is so good and life-giving, and it's something that you should desire anyway. And so what St. Paul is talking about when he talks about this marital debt, it's because sex is so good and it's so life-giving and you should desire it anyway. It's not because you need to check a box and give your husband sex so that he's appeased. Because that would be the same as I'm supposed to go to Sunday Mass because for some reason the Lord needs me to go to Sunday Mass. Somehow he's not complete if I'm not at Sunday Mass. That is so wrong. Right? Having sex is not to check a box. It's not to appease your husband. It is something that is so good, so life-giving, that any kind of obligation should actually just make sense because we already want to do it. So I hope this gives you just some nuggets to chew on in your mind and think about. And maybe just take this to prayer of why is it that I go to Mass on Sunday? Why is it that I go to Mass on holy days of obligation? And why is it that I have sex? And am I sitting in this obligatory spot of I'm only doing this out of obedience to God and not out of a deeper yearning for communion with God? And then on the sex side, right, I'm only doing this out of obedience to, my husband, or obedience to my marriage, and not out of a deeper yearning for communion. Because that's ultimately what our goal should be in both Mass and sex. Is we go to Mass, we have sex with our husband because we want to commune deeply with the other, right? In Mass, the other, God. In sex, right? The other person of our marriage. And I think that can be just a really beautiful thing to reflect on and maybe bring to a holy hour this week. Thanks so much for listening. If you are not already following us on Instagram, be sure to check us out at Charting Toward Intimacy. And if you listen to podcasts on a platform that gives you the option to rate or review, we'd love for you to do that because it helps us spread the word about the podcast. If you ever have questions, comments, or episode topic ideas, please reach out to us. We love to hear from you. You can reach out on Instagram or send us an email. Our email is in the show notes. Until next time.